Better?
Yeah, a little bit.
We should be all set to go.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. I am Ralph Engel. As Chair of the Planning Board, I have confirmed with our council, Lisa Hockman, that tonight's meeting has been convened in accordance with the Governor's Executive Order number 202.1, as again extended, which orders suspend certain provisions of the open meetings law to allow municipal boards such as this one to convene meetings via video conferencing, as we're doing. Francine Brill, as Secretary to the Planning Board, please confirm that tonight's meeting has been duly noticed and state for the record whether such notice has been posted and published. Can't hear you, Francine.
Noticed in both the newspaper and on the website.
Thank you. There are 3 public hearings which are continued this evening. They are being conducted in accordance with the Governor's Executive Order number 202.15, also is again extended. The notices relating to those hearings provided instructions for members of the public on how to view and participate in tonight's public hearings. The public has been provided with the ability to view tonight's tonight's planning board meeting on television as well as online. This meeting is being broadcast live on LMC TV. It is on channel 35 on FiOS and channel 76 on Optimum. It is also being broadcast online at lmctv.org. There is a box on the screen on a slide, marked town slide, which shows a phone number as well as codes that can be used by anybody who wants to access the public hearings by telephone. We prefer that you do it by Zoom if you can, but if you cannot, please use the telephone. A transcript of this meeting will be available at a later date. Francine, for the record, please call the roll to record which planning board members, including alternate members, are present tonight.
Al Fingal,
Present.
Ira Block,
Here.
Elizabeth Cooney,
Here.
Sarah Dunn,
Here.
Ron Mandel.
Ron,
Ron, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Here.
John Cuddy,
Here.
Ed Papazian.
Here.
okay, we have a quorum and everybody is here. In addition, those individuals who are present representing the town should please identify themselves by name and title for the viewers.
Rob Wasp, town engineer.
Lisa
Anthony, go ahead, Lisa.
Lisa Hockman, counsel to the planning board.
Anthony Oliveri, town consulting engineer.
Elizabeth Atherton, environmental planner.
Sabrina Fiddleman, town board member and liaison to the planning board.
Thank
Bill
you.
Secretary.
Okay. Rob, do you know, since these are continuations of public hearings, has anyone confirmed that the signs have been updated in an appropriate manner?
Unfortunately, Ralph, I do not have personal verification the signs were updated, but I did not hear anything otherwise that signs were not updated.
Okay, so let's assume they were. Okay. I want to make clear to applicants and anyone else who's listening in that the town still has a moratorium in effect until the end of June on mechanical rock removal. And it now also has a moratorium in effect, which runs longer than that, on the demolition of properties, prime residences on properties. Excuse me. I also want to request that nobody use the chat function because the chat function does not make it into the public record. And although this meeting is not being handled in the way it used to be done before COVID, we are required to have a public record and we want it to be complete. Okay, lastly, Francine, could you confirm that any referrals that needed to be made in connection with any of the public hearings were made?
They were.
Thank you. Okay, the first item on the agenda is a review of the minutes of our last meeting, which was on April 14th. Does anybody have any comments, questions, corrections, etc., to make as to those?
Mr. Chairman, only two minor typos. On page 10, item 4 under 3 Cornell Street, the paragraph that starts, Mr. Engel stated that the word "the" should be inserted before "only." And then page 11.
It's only the, isn't it, rather than the only?
I'm sorry?
Wouldn't the word "the" be inserted after the word "only"?
Yeah, correct. Yes. Thank you. And then page 11, item 6, second full paragraph, there should be a period after planning board.
Thank you. Anybody have anything further? Ira, nothing?
No, I told John recently when we had lunch with our wives, so it was not a planning board function, that I was surrendering any claim to proofreading expertise.
Okay.
My wife said, that's hardly anything. You can't proof anything correctly, so.
We're doing a fine job. Anyway, anybody have anything further? Then can we have a motion to accept the minutes as modified?
I'll moved.
Second,
All in favor, please raise your hands. Opposed? Abstentions? Adopted. Thank you. Next item is 2434 Boston Post Road, a continuation of a public hearing regarding the Larchmont Car Wash. Is anybody here to join us?
Yes, we have 2 people joining us. I'm going to promote them to be panelists. Oops, wrong mark. Hold on.
Good evening, Michael Stein with Hudson Engineering. I just want to come on very quickly because I believe Michael Lage will be presenting, and
Yes,
just apologize. I actually addressed it to the Village of Larchmont Building Department mistakenly, so I'll be revising that letter.
We did receive a copy, Mike, so we still have it. So we trust your findings, but yes, for the record, it'd be helpful to get the updated address.
Yes, not a problem.
Hey, Mike.
Okay. Okay. Michael, you want to have anything you want to add?
No, sir.
Okay. Is there any questions, any comments, any statements by anybody who's a member of the planning board or an alternate there too? Is there anything by any member of the professional staff? Rob, do we have anything from the public and Liz?
At this point, any members of the public in the Zoom meeting as attendees, please use the raise your hand function if you have a comment or question you wish to raise. You can also email us at the town's email account, publicqc@townofmamaroneckny.org. I do not see any hands raised this time, Ralph.
Rob,
Okay.
any violations?
No, Ed, at this point, there are no violations on the car wash property.
And there are no emails at the public account at this time.
Okay, so the issue that came up last time regarding what I guess were dry wells has been resolved? Rob, is that true?
Yes, that's correct. The building department received an inspection letter from the undersigned engineer, Mike Stein of Hudson, stating that he personally inspected the dry wells sometime in early April, I believe, and found them to be in acceptable condition, not warranting any further repairs.
Okay. Since we have no members of the public to wish to speak, and everybody else who wishes to speak has, may we have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please? Opposed? Public hearing is closed. We have asked our counsel, Lisa, to prepare a draft of a resolution extending the special use permit in connection with the car wash. Excuse me, I believe all members of the planning board have received copies. Does anybody have any comments with respect to the draft? Okay, excuse me. If not, would somebody like to make a motion to adopt the draft as presented to us as the final version of the resolution extending the special use permit?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? All opposed? Done. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
See you in 2 years.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Okay, the next item on the agenda is 3 Cornell Street. So I assume we have some people who wish us to join us. And before we go further as to that, John Cuddy has some things that he found, which I think we should discuss. Francine, I believe that you circulated some language in connection with swimming pools to all members of this board. Is that correct? Can't hear you.
Whatever I was given got sent back to everyone.
And did the applicant's representatives receive it as well?
I didn't send anything to the applicants.
No,
Rob?
we did not receive anything.
Oh, can someone just, if,
Why don't we deal with it then when we get to it? Because we can't send it to him right now.
No, Lisa, I did send a copy of the recommended additional conditions, if that's what we're talking about.
yes,
Yes, yeah, that was sent.
Oh,
directly.
all right,
The 3 short paragraphs dealing with swimming pools.
right. We don't, it doesn't apply to us. We're not that close to the I think it didn't necessarily apply to us because we weren't close to the property line. I don't remember. Offhand, I don't remember what it was.
Okay, well, we'll go over them. John, you want to explain what this is all about?
So the the subcommittee that was designated by the chairman at last month's meeting met several times to consider, what additional conditions, if any, were appropriate to impose or to include in resolutions that might arise with the planning board to approve swimming pools, particularly swimming pools that are located in environmentally sensitive areas close to watercourses and wetlands. We met on 2 occasions over the course of the month and came up with a number of recommendations to the planning board as possible conditions that they might want to consider on future applications, including this evening, if appropriate. The conditions are, I think, quite straightforward and hopefully non-controversial. They're short enough so that I'd actually want to read them into the record if no one has objection. The first condition is that pool filters shall be cleaned and organic waste removed in a manner that avoids any contamination of the property, which is a defined term in these resolutions, and any adjacent property. That would be the basic condition. For those locations that are actually within close proximity to wetlands or watercourses, we would include the language, including without limitation, adjacent wetlands and watercourses, just to make clear that, you know, the cleaning of organic waste from the filters needs to avoid any type of contamination to that wetlands area.
Okay, so John, with respect to the Cornell property, the bracketed portion that you just read
Would not apply.
would not apply and would not be included, correct?
That's correct, yes. The second condition would be that all pool chemicals shall be stored in closed containers kept in an enclosed area at a height that exceeds the base flood elevation. This would be applicable to all swimming pools that come before the planning board. And finally, the third condition would be there shall be no direct or indirect discharge of water from a swimming pool on the property, again, a defined term, other than into a sanitary sewer, a storm sewer, or a tanker truck that removes it from the property. So these are the three options that we would find acceptable to discharge water, whether or not it is in close proximity to a wetlands or watercourse area. So those are the three conditions that we'd like to consider including in future swimming pool applications. And I open it up for the planning board members to comment as to whether or not they agree that these are appropriate generally, or in any given instance, we can consider that.
John, I have one question.
Sure, Liz.
And that is in terms of paragraph X.
Yes.
Is there how often should this be done? As often as the manufacturer recommends? Are we telling them the pool filters have to be cleaned once a year, twice a season?
There's no interval that's specified. I think part of the committee's or subcommittee's view is that folks would likely do this as a matter of simply their own, interest.
Like periodic maintenance.
Keeping the
All
pool
right.
clean. Yes. That we didn't need to specify that.
Okay.
I believe that the thrust of the language is not as to how often you have to clean it, but what you cannot do when you do clean it, which is done by backwashing, which takes organic matter if you have a diatomaceous earth filter rather than a cartridge filter, and spreads it out. So
correct. Yes.
It would be consistent. It would be consistent with this provision, never to clean your filter.
I see.
Yeah.
Also, just to be clear, it does not specify how this has to be done because technology changes. People do different things. All it is meant to specify is what the result's supposed to be, which we believe anybody with a pool would want to have anyway.
I guess in my mind, one of the questions that comes out is the enforceability of some regulation or amendment as proposed.
Rob, you want to deal with that?
Sure. Well, unfortunately, the enforcement does fall back onto the building department, and by the nature of the pool maintenance, we don't have somebody on site every single time that somebody wishes to maintain their pool equipment. So it does become incumbent on the homeowner being diligent to mind the requirements, but at least putting these conditions onto multiple places does give us enforceability that if we receive a complaint or are called out for, a discharge onto the street, that we have, grounds to issue violations upon.
No, I understand that, and that's why I raised the point. It's really not enforceable unless somebody complains. And that's number one problem I have with it. The second problem I have with it is, especially with X, it's really subjective at this particular point in time. Who's to consider when to clean the filter? I mean, you're going to have someone that's going to be very meticulous and clean it regularly, and then you're going to have someone that is not going to clean it at all. Maybe they'll clean it once a year.
And
And
nobody has specified a time frame for doing it. There's
Yeah.
nothing in X that set forth a time frame for that very reason. Different people will do it different times, but in all likelihood, everybody will do it now and then because they want to swim in a clean pool.
yeah, I don't know. It's a nice suggestion, but whether it should be incorporated into any type of enforcement, not enforcement, any type of proposal that we put in, I have a problem with that.
I mean, Ed, I think I understand your point. I think it's important to just focus on the fact that we're not specifying that it actually needs to be done at any given interval. But if it is done and when it's done, we really don't want it to be done by backwashing into, you know, the lawn and contaminating, you know, that property and potentially adjacent properties. And particularly if it's within proximity close to a wetland, that would be an egregious, you know, offense. So, I mean, and as to enforcement, look, I mean, a lot of what's in the town code, no one's looking over your shoulder. It's enforced upon a violation becoming known, and that provides a deterrent effect as well. But I think it bears mentioning that, you know, to have, these are standards that we're specifying that we think, you know, represent best practices for pool owners. And we think that on balance, these represent reasonable obligations to impose when we approve a pool application. So that's what I would say to your concern.
The as far as X is concerned, just for a clarification, aren't these pool pumps already hooked into the sanitary waste system?
I don't believe that's necessarily the case. Rob, can you help us with that?
Sure. I would say that it's a common practice, and actually we've discovered that the town code seems to encourage, if not require, the connection for those drains to go into the sanitary sewer when it's available. There are, however, some properties in town that do not have a public sanitary sewer connection available. Therefore, in those cases, you would have to go to an alternate means.
Yeah. I think it's a nice suggestion, but setting it as a standard when it's not enforceable, I'm not going to oppose it, but I think there's a problem with it. So I'll leave it up to the rest of the board.
Anybody else on the board have any comments? And then I'll ask Elliot and Shlomo whether they have any problem with this.
I just have a question about the provision, one of the provisions in paragraph Z. Why is it okay for people to discharge their pool water into the storm sewers? Doesn't that just go right out into the sound?
Rob, you want to deal with that one?
Right. So in this case, the way that definition is written is not to encourage a direct discharge to the storm sewer. I believe the term is being used broadly to apply to an on-site stormwater management practice, like an underground infiltration system. We did find in the code that it does have an outdated reference that mentions storm sewer. However, it would not be the building department or the engineering department's position to ever allow a direct discharge to a public storm sewer.
Anybody else? Okay, Elliot and Shlomo, any of this, what we're talking about?
Yeah, no, I don't think any of it applies to us. We have a cartridge filter that doesn't need backwashing. And I believe that the state building code doesn't allow it to go into requires it to go into the sanitary sewer if you're going to discharge, because it's contaminated water. Unless you leave it sit for a week and facilitate all of the chemicals being evaporated, the state code requires it to go to the sanitary sewer.
That's why we left the possibility of a different sewer, because there may be reasons to do exactly what you said and didn't want to prohibit that. There also are people who truck the water in or out. Takes a long time to fill a pool with a garden hose. Shlomo, do you have any comments?
Well, as far as my experience in building different pools and different homes, we do leave and discharge into the sewer system. And it's required by law, and they come and inspect the final inspection for the asphalt. So, and we mention it to the homeowner, the buyer, and we are telling them that that's what it needs. So I have no control after that. So, but we do have a discharge into the sewer system. And for my opinion, it's very, very difficult to control. And as what Rob said, you have to catch them if they do it or they don't do it. And when they come and clean the pools, the pool cleaners, they do it or they don't do it. So go and check them all the time. When they come in weekly, they clean the pool. So it's very, very difficult to. Yes, I do agree that it should be into the sewer system, you know, for environmental standpoint. But go and check it. What people do. It's very, very difficult.
Well, nobody's going to stand there as a policeman watching it. You can imagine.
Yeah. But yeah, we do it in Scarsdale. I don't know what is in down in Mamaroneck, but we do require to do it in Scarsdale.
Okay. Anybody else?
The only issue I've had with pools along kind of wetland trail areas is along the leather stocking trail. We had a problem with somebody discharging onto the trail and flooding it out. And we have, I have to try to track where it's coming from because it's a very, very long hose or pipe that's coming from somewhere, and it's difficult to track back with all the vegetation. But we think we know which house it's from.
Okay, but you don't have any problem with what the language we're talking about either. It can only improve what you were talking about now.
Right.
Well, Ralph, I don't agree with Ed, but I agree with Ed, by which I mean there's an existing provision in chapter 192H. As I read it, maybe Rob can tell me if I'm reading this incorrectly, but it covers some of the same subject matter as clause X, but not necessarily in the same fashion. And I think it would be a better idea to be sure that whatever the provision is, that the two provisions are consistent with each other and additive to each other, not somewhat at odds. Because what John drafted deals with cleaning the pool,
right? Not
necessarily emptying a pool. Occasionally, pools are emptied, but the town code deals with wastewater.
That's what the third one deals with. And since we didn't want to get into, some people may not think of pool water as wastewater, the third item here deals with discharges from swimming pools. So there's no question.
Wouldn't it maybe be, this may be an interim solution, but wouldn't it be a better idea to amend or modify chapter 192 so that there's no ambiguity about what's intended, that it's not just dirty water, it's any water from a pool?
I think that is the intent, but this is similar to what went on with mechanical rock removal.
This is an interim step.
This is an interim step.
We're hoping the town will pick this up as well.
And one other thing to consider, I guess I'd want input from Liz and Rob and Anthony is, should these be as conditions in the resolution as well as notes on the plans, or one or the other or both? What, do you have thoughts on that?
Personally, I would share that there's really no hurt to have them in both locations. As far as use of the plans, that's usually the first document that gets pulled whenever code enforcement or somebody goes out to do an inspection. So I think having these as standard pool notes or standard pool conditions on a plan is beneficial. But I think also just to capture it in the resolution also is applicable.
Anthony?
I think that they'd be fine on the plan. It's just maybe the last one might be more specific on the plan as to where those discharges are specifically going, other than just saying, direct or indirect, other than the three, So I think, that could probably end up being a more specific note, but it could also be there as a general note as well. I don't think it would do any harm.
Liz, do you have anything to add to this?
Just that, if it's required to go into the sanitary system and it's piped that way, then it's more likely to happen. I agree with Rob that it should be in the resolution, and it could also be a note on the plan.
Well, Lisa, is there any reason why we could not approve a resolution tonight with these provisions in it and the language get added to the plans afterwards so that we don't delay anything?
That can happen. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the, specific example of 3 Cornell, these 3 notes wouldn't have any bad effects. They'd be fine, but there might be one where we might want to just change it slightly. But I think in general, these could work.
Okay, but we're only trying to finish up this application, which has been before us for a while. So, Elliot or Shlomo, do you have anything further to say before we close? Well, before we see whether any member of the public wants to say anything?
No, we're good.
We good.
Okay, Rob, anybody? Liz, anybody?
All right, anybody watching the meeting as an attendee, please use the raise your hand function if you wish to share a comment or ask a question. You can also send emails to us at the town's email account, publicqc@townofmamaroneckny.org.
Or you can call the number that's on the screen in the blue box.
That's correct.
I would propose to revise number 16 to say the plans shall be the plans, capital P, shall be revised to reflect the following notes. And then I'll have X, Y, and Z. Actually, I'll turn it to A, B, and C. But I guess I'll want to make sure that there are conditions as well as notes. So
yeah, they'll just be twice, but with the same wording. And
yeah,
with plans for the plans to be modified afterwards so that we can adopt the resolution this evening.
Yep.
Okay, Rob, you have nobody? And
Yes,
Liz,
I don't see any hands raised at this time.
And there are no emails at the public account.
okay, then can we have a motion to close the public hearing, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Excuse me.
Aye.
All in favor of closing the meeting? Okay. Anybody opposed? Okay, any abstentions to that? No. Okay, we have a draft resolution, which I think everybody's had a chance to see. Does anybody want to make any modifications other than the one that Lisa just mentioned to be included, which would deal with this language in the resolution and identical language on the plans?
Ralph, I did want to offer just a quick option for the board to consider. I had prepared a slightly tailored version of, I guess, condition Z, as is applicable to 3 Cornell, as there's no connection to a storm sewer proposed. If you wish, I could read it for the board's consideration.
Sure.
Sure. I said, there shall be no discharge of water from a swimming pool on the property other than into the sanitary sewer as shown on the approved drawings, semicolon, or otherwise to an appropriate tank vessel for handling and disposable by a licensed waste hauler, which would capture that if for any reason the sanitary sewer could not be used, they could still have a truck come in and haul the water away.
Elliot and Shlomo, that okay with you?
Yes.
Just one other thing, could we add to that unless authority is granted by the building department? I'm just looking for a contingency in case something comes up that we are not contemplating.
I mean, such as except in case of emergency as determined by the building department?
Correct, Ira.
I think I dropped the emergency because who knows what that is. But,
I agree with Edmund.
okay, Rob, okay?
Sure.
Okay, so you'll feed that language to Lisa, which will be slightly different than what we have. So can we have a motion now to?
Mr. Chairman,
As,
Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I have
John, do you have
a
anything?
couple of,
I'm sorry.
couple of comments on the proposed resolution. In the second whereas clause, the word "the property" "the" should be lowercase. In the third whereas clause, Scarsdale has jurisdiction for the front of the property, comma, including the house. There should be a comma after house. And then I just want to raise a question on page 3. This has come up before. Paragraph 4, where we're talking about modifications to the site plan. We use the term whether the modification is substantial and thus should be further considered by the planning board. Is substantial the proper standard, or should that be material? I'm just concerned that substantial is very subjective, and materiality is something that courts and others typically know how to determine, but substantiality is oftentimes a question.
Lisa, any comment on that?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just going to take a quick look in the town code just to see whether, I don't think the standard comes from the town code. And as long as it doesn't, I agree with John, we should change it to material.
I don't think it came from the town code. I recollect back to the Durham Road subdivision events, that's when that clause, that concept was introduced.
I do have the E-code chapter open. So chapter 178.16 reads, the town engineer or the building inspector or the director of building code enforcement and land use development may approve minor revisions to an approved site plan necessitated by field conditions encountered during the course of construction that cannot have been anticipated during the approval process, as long as such revision will not materially change the approved site plan and will not adversely impact the neighboring properties or the environment.
So yes, I think we should change it to material.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also think, Lisa, maybe going forward, not today, because we want to get this done, we ought to track that statute a little more closely.
Yes.
And then on item 14 on page 4, where we're talking about the rock removal moratorium, in the last line, or second to last line, where it says, of the survey required by the section to the owners, (S) of the applicable surveyed lot. That should be lot, (S) close paren, because it could be multiple lots, and it's a little confusing as to whether you're talking about the lot on which the rock is being removed. It's really the adjacent lots, not the lot where the rock is being removed.
That's correct.
Okay.
Well, why not even say to the nearby property owners, because they're not all adjacent.
Correct, right. To anyone who has had a surveyed lot, they should be given the survey.
Well, it says to the owners of the applicable surveyed lots.
Yeah, I mean, we now have a town ordinance about this.
Yeah.
And which is in the midst of potentially being revised to include what we're just talking about in the ordinance, after which we won't have to deal with this at all, assuming the town board approves that. So I don't think we have to micromanage this one, because it will disappear. And in this case, you guys aren't planning to do any mechanical rock removal anyway. Okay, I mean, it's quite the opposite. You feel.
Yeah, we have no rock removal on the site.
Yeah. I have one item, which is 15A, which is, I believe it should read, prior to the issuance of a certificate of completion. as opposed to a letter of completion. I think you call them certificates.
It's actually used interchangeably, Ralph. I think our town template, when it prints, at least for my erosion permits, it does title itself as letter of completion, LOC. But either one means basically the same thing as far as the building department is concerned. So we use them interchangeably.
But the way everywhere else in the resolution is referred to as a certificate. So to be consistent, we should be consistent with whatever it is your department does.
Sure.
What you're saying is that.
Well, a letter, Ralph, a letter can certify something and thereby
That's true.
mean to be a certificate.
But you call it a letter of completion or a certificate of completion? Or both, either one?
I think that the physical document has a title on it, which reads letter of completion. So by default, but like I said, both terms are used interchangeably within the building department.
Well, in numbers 8 and 9, we use with initial caps certificate of completion.
Yeah, I think we should be consistent in going forward. Lisa, if you can speak to Rob and work out what we should call it across the board.
Okay.
Sure.
At least we can finish this one today. Anybody have any other changes? There we have a motion to adopt the resolution, including the three provisions, but with the last one modified as suggested by Rob. Yes.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
in favor? Aye, two.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Approved, gentlemen. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Francine, who did you get as the second for that?
I seconded it.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is 22 Prior Manor Road, as to which an issue has arisen, which has to get dealt with. But Rob, why don't you bring them in first?
Okay. I've admitted the applicant team for 22 Prior Manor. Rick or Mike, if you could just confirm that everybody from your team is in and we can get started.
Okay, let me, everybody here?
Yeah, yes, it looks that way.
Is Thomas Manning joining us?
Yes, good evening.
I don't see. Can I see Michael? Sullivan's, Rick, Liz?
I'm here.
Okay. So question is as follows. The plans that we got from Liz Hand-Fry had a Connecticut seal, but today we have now received papers with a New York seal. So you, Liz, are licensed to practice as an architect in New York, correct?
I am. I'm sorry that was a CAD error, and I'm sorry about that.
Okay. We have, however, on these plans, pages PL 1, 2, and 3. PL 3 is signed and initialed by Rick Yestet. PL 1 and 2 are signed and initialed by a Thomas Manning, licensed in the state of Connecticut. Furthermore, they specify that they are for a job for, I'm not sure how you pronounce this, NGUYEN, located at 17 Maywood Road, Darien, Connecticut, 06820. They say absolutely nothing about 22 Prior Manor Road. So we don't even know two things. Number one, that the architect who did this is licensed in New York, which I understand is required. And number two, that these are even the right plans. I mean, we have no doubt that the Sullivans want to build a pool. the first page of this shows us a picture of what pool, what the whole thing is about. But the documents which are the design of the pool, the engineering pool and spa structural engineering plan, it's called, are not right. I don't know. That's why I asked the question whether the person whose seal is on here is joining us, Mr. Manning. Can I ask somebody who's here on behalf of the applicant what Thomas Manning's relationship to this whole thing is?
I'm not sure where that came from. Rick, do you know?
Yeah, that came from you guys. For the pool construction details.
That are on your drawings?
That were included in our drawings, yes, correct.
Yeah, they're not on Rick Ested's drawings. Your drawings carry your name and your seal, and they have the right address.
There's a PL 1 and 2, there's a PL 1 and 2, which are the Connecticut license. And PL 3 is Mr. Yestad's.
Okay, over and beyond that, I'll add one more thing. They specifically refer to the Connecticut code. Under applicable code, somebody whited out Connecticut Road in New York, but all the references are to the Connecticut building code, which of course is inapplicable to New York. So unfortunately, we've got a problem. Does anybody, Mr. Sullivan, I can imagine that you're not thrilled about this. We were surprised ourselves. Does anybody have any explanation of what this is? Whether these even are the right plans with the wrong information on them? Because I don't see how we can adopt plans which appear to be just totally wrong. Only in this respect. Liz and Fry fixed her part.
Can I ask, can I just ask, assuming these are the wrong plans, would those plans, if they didn't exist at all attached to this, would we be still able to go forward with this application? Or is this something that we always have in regard to the plans that come before us that we make decisions on?
Liz, I was going to comment on that same thought. It's not typical that the board would always see all the detailed plumbing design for the pool construction as part of the planning board submittal. I don't have the plans that are being referenced in front of me, so I don't know exactly what's on them. Maybe Rick could describe that, but I would say that pool plumbing, things that are of that detailed nature, generally come with the building permit application.
Right.
Would it be possible for somebody to maybe screen share just so that we can all look at what's being discussed?
I don't know how to do that, but maybe somebody else does.
Yeah, I can do that.
I would say that the landscape plan by comparison is something that the board does routinely approve as part of its approval. So that is the opposite case where that would be a document that the board should see during the course of review.
The landscape plans were in the submission, right? Made with
Yeah.
the wrong field. There was a set of architectural plans that I don't have any plans that are PL plans. I'm not sure where those came from.
They came in the submission that I got from
In
Francine.
the packet, okay.
And I don't think the resolutions reference those PL plans.
No.
Maybe they were only submitted hard copy and mistakenly got added to the hard copy set that was submitted.
That seems to be the case because I don't have the PDF version on the website either.
They're not on the website, right?
Right.
So,
And it's pool structural and plumbing plans.
Yeah.
pool and spa structural and plumbing plans You guys have a spa as well as a pool?
Not a separate spa. It's
What's the dimensions of the proposed pool that you're proposing? Length and width? And depth?
Rick, you have the drawings?
Yeah,
Put up the site plan. Here's the pool over here on the right. And the pool itself is 40 feet long by 18 feet 6 inches.
And at the deep end, it's 7 feet, and the shallow end, it's 3.6.
Correct.
Total square footage is 740. You can do the math. I think it's close enough to that.
Yeah.
My heavy hunch is that what we're looking at was sort of like a marked up draft, so to speak, of something that was to be applied to this project from a different project.
Yeah, but I sort of agree with Liz that these two plans and once it's up on the screen, can you move to the PL1, 2 and PL1? So Rob could take a look at it because I think it's inapplicable and we just eliminate it.
Yeah, I believe that, yes.
I mean, if that can be done, then we can proceed.
yeah, I think this was the early submission, so let me,
No, we just received it.
okay.
Yeah, it's in the most recent batch that we got.
But it had never been in any prior batch. And I've never seen this before on any swimming pool submission.
No, wait, not including the one that we just went through.
Correct.
So,
Was the architecture and engineering firm Russell and Dawson INC in East Hartford ring a bell with anybody?
I understand that architecture firms that don't deal normally with pool construction oftentimes subcontract the pool elements out. So that may be what's at issue here. But I guess I have a question as to what do we know about this pool in terms of discharge of water, wastewater? Where are the discharge points? I don't see any of that indicated. There's a 100-year flood plan that runs right through the one of the lines runs right through the pool. Does that matter? I mean, what the reason for getting these revised plans was to include the floodplain, and when we see that, it runs right through the proposed pool. I guess I'd ask the professional staff whether that's of concern. And then I look at the checklist that's included on the plans, and down where it says location of any wetlands disturbance and restoration details to fully comply with Town Code Chapter 114, and it's marked as not applicable, NA. And I'd like to understand why that would be the case.
So I can probably respond to the floodplain portion of the question. So Chapter 110 is a general drawing note that whenever there's a identified flood hazard zone, that we want to see the floodplain boundary shown on the site drawing. Chapter 110 doesn't necessarily prohibit you from doing work within the regulated floodplain, but it sets standards that apply to that construction, just so that there's no negative impact on the surrounding community within the broader floodplain. So as part of this resolution and part of the applicant's submittal for this month included an analysis that basically states that, basically that the amount of fill placement within the floodplain is negligible as it's directly tributary to the Long Island Sound, it would not produce any, recognizable level of change in sea level rise or during a major storm. So basically, the letter that was submitted and the inclusion of the floodplain boundary on the drawing basically are what are required under the code to be submitted, this to be approved.
So the concern about floodplain is solely with respect to the volume of material extracted from the earth, and whether that's going to have any material impact on the adjacent wetlands.
I would say that's the most meaningful portion applicable to this project. In cases where you're not on the Long Island Sound, it can be a different story. Obviously, if you were to be changing the cross section of a stream or a water course that's a floodway, that could have negative impacts. But there's also requirements that are more applicable to building construction and installation of equipment. So you wouldn't want to place any sort of pool equipment or for a house HVAC equipment within the flood hazard zone. You have to put it above the flood elevation.
Does the fact that this abuts the Premium River cause any reason for concern?
The Premium River is tidal, so in a flood, it is in a flood zone, but I think it's really more just because of the pool equipment in this situation. I've only seen a few where the pool would have to be constructed differently because of a fear that it would pop out of the ground and float basically during a flood. But this is higher above the much higher above the flood elevation. So
there's no concern about, in the event of flooding, that the pool water, chlorinated or however it was sanitized, would flow out into the neighboring environment.
Maybe the applicant can speak to that if that would possibly happen.
They have the rainwater pool.
Michael, Rick?
Michael?
What's the question?
I mean, from our perspective, that would mean that the pool would have to be empty. Otherwise, the pool is completely full. So the amount of freeboard on the pool is not going to be enough to make it buoyant.
I think also on the environmental question, I would just be of the mind that, the amount of dilution that would occur as soon as that water is introduced to the Long Island Sound, at least hydraulically connected waters to the hydraulic sound, that it wouldn't make any meaningful impact to the environment.
Yeah, I think we're talking about two different things: floating of the pool and then mixing of chlorinated water during a 100-year flood. Right?
I'm not looking out towards the sound. I'm looking upwards towards New Rochelle and the Premium River, which is a more concentrated environment. Whether pool water that might contaminate the Premium River going upstream, if that were to be the case, would that create any environmental impact?
The river would flow downstream.
How does the water go upstream?
Only during a tide. The tide could bring the.
It's a tidal area.
But then you have the
Yeah, but
push
the
pull.
tide
It goes
is
up
not
back.
going up to New Rochelle.
No.
Is the 100-year flood elevation here above the pool deck?
No.
No.
So
the pool deck is
from the
elevation
pool-
13.
Yeah, so you're not overtopping the pool in the 100-year flood.
Right.
So
Okay.
you're not getting chlorinated water, let's say, mixing out. And then I think in that situation, they could probably have the same argument they have with the flood volume. How many trillions of gallons of water in the Long Island Sound?
Right.
So that's the answer there. The pool floating is another thing. I think the 100-year flood will hit the bottom of the pool, so to speak. So there is always a potential for flooding. I mean, for floating, if there was a circumstance where they had the pool empty, as Mr. Stein mentioned, and also what's done is hydrostatic relief valves are usually placed in the main drains of these pools to prevent that. So the water would actually go in through the main drain through these hydrostatic relief valves to prevent the pool from floating. It's the usual practice to prevent that. But again, the pool would have to be empty, or at least almost empty.
Yeah.
Is this the kind of pool that gets totally drained every year?
No.
No.
So we're talking about something which has a minimal chance of actually occurring. So let me go back to.
It does happen. I've seen it. I think the Orienta Beach Club, I think that pool came out of the ground some years back, but it was a bad set of circumstances. I think they were working on the pool, so it was completely empty.
Right.
And so they did the hydrostatic relief valves were not functioning in the bottom of the pool.
Well, one can be.
What elevation was their pool?
I don't know. I mean, they're down close to the shoreline, very close.
Yeah, it was close to
I
sea.
doubt they were 14 feet up or wherever the surface.
It's probably lower, yeah.
Okay, for our engineers, if we were to remove PL 1, 2, and 3 from this application so that the problem really disappears, is we still have a complete application that we can act upon tonight?
I would recommend yes.
I would second that. We don't really want to have the pool structural and plumbing details in this plan.
Okay, so from the point of view of the applicant, you're willing to remove these 3 pages from your application?
Yes, correct.
Done.
What about the water discharge points? Is that
We're gonna-
specified anywhere?
John, I think we should go back to the 3 provisions we discussed before. I'm not sure if it's true, put them or not.
Yeah, John, that's on C1.
C1?
Yeah.
I believe they went back to the same provision we had on the last application, discharge to the sanitary sewer.
Okay.
Okay, so the rain garden part is gone, right?
Correct.
Thank you.
Oh, discharging the rain garden. Okay, I understand.
Liz, there's no discharge to the rain garden.
Right, that's what I was just trying
Oh,
to,
no,
when you said the rain garden, I was like, oh yeah.
No, you got cut off. I didn't hear everything you said. I just wanted to.
No, I mean, the most recent thing we got mentioned that, but that's gone too. So we're going back to things that could be approved this evening. Did the applicant's crew hear a discussion we had before regarding the 3 provisions?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Here, obviously, there is nearby wetlands and so that part would be included. But do you have any problem with including those in your own resolution, in the resolutions we would do for you, either or both wetlands and site plan, and potentially putting them on the plans too, so long as you can put them on the plans after tonight?
I think they're reasonable.
Okay.
Yes, and just, we are using a cartridge system as well.
Correct.
So anybody on the board have any further questions or comments before we open this up to the public? Rob, Liz?
Okay. At this point, anyone who's in the attendees group, which appears to be one person at this time, please use the raise your hand function if you wish to speak or raise a comment. You can also email us at the town's email account, publicqc@townmamaroneckny.org. There are no hands raised this time.
Can I ask, I'm looking at some of the plans. 2 spots, they say, for details about the pool, look at the arch, like the arch plans or the arch details.
Probably a short abbreviation for architect.
And for the record, there are no emails.
Or what are you getting at?
So here's a is a difficult, I think a difficult question. The plans that have been submitted that we're accepting, we're prepared to accept, make a reference to something which is now being deleted because it's incorrect.
I would actually say that, the architect is obviously a more broad term, but the plans by Rick Yestad are still being included, and those are the plans that we've referenced at the.
I understand that, but it's saying the plans that on L1 that's dated 3/4/21. It describes the pool and then says for swimming pool details, see ARCH, now I know it means architectural drawings.
I understand. Perhaps we could consider an additional condition that just reads that whereas references to the pool plumbing and detail sheets will be eliminated on the final plan to be stamped and recorded.
Yeah, Rick, you could.
That's fine.
Those references, correct?
Yes, we can do that.
Anybody else on the board have any other comments? Rob, you said there were no raised hands, and Liz, you said there were no emails, and we've had no phone calls, correct?
That's correct.
So with all this discussion and things yet to be done, can we have a motion to close the public hearing, please?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Public hearing is closed. Okay, now we have two different resolutions.
And Ralph, what I would suggest, and actually John Cuddy had brought this up before, that since the draft wetland resolution presents findings to be made by the planning board, I think it would be worth if somebody would be willing to read those into the record, just to make sure that the board takes ownership of making those findings.
Oh, that's true.
Or at least it doesn't need to be read into the record, but I just would want to highlight those draft findings and make sure all the board members have read it and to find out whether there's any objections.
Okay, would everybody on the board please confirm that it was read? But actually, in the wetlands resolution, I do have some wording changes which I think need to get made.
Okay.
At the top of the second page, it's whereas according to the towns, the word towns is missing, consulting engineer. And in the last whereas on the same page, it's not the planning board's consulting engineer, it's the town's consulting engineer.
Yeah, and there's language dropped out of that first recital too.
Did you get that in?
Yeah, it's subject to the requirements codified in section 110-21 of the town code.
Okay. So can all the members of the planning board confirm that they have read and agreed with the various findings which are listed specifically in the wetlands and watercourse permit resolution?
They start in the middle of page 2 and continue through page 3, page 4.
I've read it and I'm fine with it.
This is Ron. I'm also fine with it.
The rest of the crew, please.
In terms of the last finding over on the top of page 4, where it says plans by the engineer show measures to mitigate soil erosion, would that be the applicant's engineer making those measurements?
Yes.
Yes.
I think it should read applicant's engineer as it does elsewhere.
Okay.
Who read it? Anybody else?
I don't have a problem with the findings, but the recitation of the plans omits the submission that included things that have now been deleted.
That's correct. I have no idea how this sort of mix-up, I'll call it that, came to pass. But since the recitation does not include the things that now are not being included, the recitation of the plans, I think, is correct.
No, it's incomplete. L1 is included, but there's an L2 and an L3, unless that's being deleted. I didn't understand that was being deleted.
Well, no, I don't think there was any intent to delete L2. No, just looking at them.
That may just be a typo on my part. I had included the landscape plan sheet. So
For example, deals with the pool fence, which has to be in there.
And L3.
I would propose to re-include L2 and L3 on both of the recitals.
Are we deleting PL3 along with PL1 and 2?
Well, PL3 isn't in there, is it?
Oh,
No.
it's not listed at all. No, all three PLs.
No, I'm asking whether the applicant intends to include PL3 while deleting PL1 and 2.
I think, for clarity, we could take all of the pool details out.
Yeah,
I think that would be a lot better than to leave in just a little bit in 3.
right.
So as to the wetlands and watercourse permit draft resolution with the modifications we've just made, I have a motion to accept it.
Mr. Chairman, I still have some comments on the language there. The whereas clause at the top of page 2, the end of that reads, and is subject to the. I don't know what the
One
refers.
that Lisa just completed.
Yeah, that was, John, you're right. I had dropped that out, and it should conclude to say to the requirements codified in section 110-21 of the town code. That's the section that deals with the floodplains.
In production, one line disappeared.
I see. Then in the next whereas town code 110-17C, there should be a parenthesis after C.
Yes, thank you.
And then down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The sixth whereas the applicant's engineer has asserted, I would recommend using the word estimated, that 222 cubic yards. Asserted has a connotation I think is not appropriate. The estimate is that 222 cubic yards of fill will be displaced. I think that's the way to.
It's certainly a nicer way to say it.
That's
Exactly.
fine. I'll make the change.
And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, with the various modifications we've discussed, can we have a motion to adopt the wetlands and watercourse permit resolution, please?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Done. Now the other resolution. By the way, this includes, just to be clear, includes the 3 paragraphs that we discussed before in both of these resolutions. One of these resolutions survives the other, in effect, because one's only good for a year, the wetlands one. So the easy thing to do is put them in both and please add them to your plans. If you can get the exact language from, pardon me, from Rob or from Lisa.
Yes, we have the language and it'll be included.
Oh, you have it already. Okay, great.
And Rob, to the extent you had changed that one for 3 Cornell, did you make any other changes to the 22 prior manner, or were those as John had crafted?
I had proposed similar language for this resolution, as well as the methodology for disposal is the same.
Okay.
So I would recommend that we use the same language that I had proposed for 3 Cornell.
Okay, so then if you send that to me and I guess also to Rick, we'll both make sure we get those where they need to be.
John, that okay with you?
Yes, yes.
Okay, does anybody have any modifications to be made other than what we've already discussed to the proposed draft resolution on the residential site plan approval?
Chairman, in the fifth whereas clause, where it says the town building inspector in a memorandum dated, the word "and" should be removed.
All right.
Hang on, I'm just looking for that. 1, 2, 3. In a memory. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yep, and the same change that we made in the prior resolution on the other application in paragraph 615, it should be the applicable surveyed lots, plural.
Yes.
Okay.
And then also changing substantial to material.
Yes.
Okay, any other modifications being proposed? All right, as so modified, may we have a motion to adopt the residential site plan and approval draft?
So moved.
Second?
Second,
Okay, all in favor? Please. Opposed? Abstentions? Done. Thank you all. Enjoy the pool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. The last item on today's agenda is 15 Greystone Road, which is not a public hearing and is only on for continued consideration. Do we have an applicant present, Rob?
We do. I am admitting Mr. Moran to the meeting, and Mr. Stein is already here.
Oh, that's right here.
Evening.
Okay. I think where we are at this point is various technical items which are relevant to the overall application and what's necessary to potentially approve a subdivision. Lisa, do you want to get into this?
Yes. Last month, when I explained the subdivision process, I had stated that as far as sequencing, it was my expectation that the planning board would have to conclude the subdivision review before the zoning board would be able to consider variances, since the lots wouldn't be created until after the subdivision would be approved, if it were to be approved. But taking another look at the New York State law for this, it does contemplate the planning board referring the matter to the zoning board. And although I have not had an opportunity to discuss this with zoning board members, I think it would be worth, I wanted to put it back to you planning board members to see if any of you have any opposition to my suggesting to the planning board that they take this up and consider.
You mean to the zoning board?
Thank you.
zoning board.
Yes, to the zoning board, to see if the zoning board would be willing to take this up on my recommendation, assuming the planning board supports my recommendation, to consider the variances prior to the planning board taking up the subdivision application. And the rationale is that I think we agree that the subdivision review is much more extensive than the review that would be associated with the variance application. And since they're both necessary, it would seem more efficient to proceed first with the zoning board application. But I would like to get input of planning board members before I bring this to the zoning board.
Lisa.
Will the zoning board accept it?
I don't know yet. I haven't, my recommendation is that they could accept it and they should accept it, but I can't speak for them.
Lisa,
Yes.
I'm a little puzzled. I thought at least tentatively you had concluded that it wasn't a matter of discretion, apart from whatever discretion the zoning board may generally have, but the way the statute was written, it was essentially our obligation, that is the planning board's obligation, to refer it to the zoning board, or else we couldn't grant the subdivision as it is proposed because of the failure to comply with zoning.
Well, I mean, my view on that is that if the planning board made their approval conditioned upon granting the zoning variances, that serves the same purpose. So I view it as a chicken and egg type of situation where I do believe that it would be permissible, legally permissible for either board to go before the other. But I still think it's my recommendation would be that the zoning board should go first. That's my view. I don't think that has been litigated, and I don't know if challenged, but I believe that it would be legally permissible for either board to go first as long as either approval was conditioned upon the approval by the other board.
So my suggestion then, and I'm not intending to create the opportunity for the matter to be litigated, is that we solicit from the applicant whether or not if this board, the planning board, endorsed the or suggested with a capital S to the applicant and accompanied by what you described before as what your intention to recommend would be, sequencing it in a way in which before the planning board gets into the subdivision weeds, so to speak, it goes to the zoning board.
And we had spoken with Ms. Hockerman prior to the meeting just about this specific topic. And as far as for our client, this really would make the most sense because otherwise we could be going through designing all the different provisions for the site, whether stormwater, utilities, grading, coming up with different quantities of materials, and go through a tremendous expense to our client, and then eventually get to the zoning board and then be denied. So that's really the difficulty here for us, is that if we at least are going to the zoning board first, we're getting the input from the zoning board, whether we get approval or not, then we come back to the planning board.
I mean, you understand that it's possible the zoning board approves it and the planning board doesn't.
Yes.
But if the zoning board doesn't, everything else is a waste of time.
Correct.
Well, not entirely, Mr. Chairman. It seems to me there's always a fallback position, maybe nobody wants to assume it, of converting the proposed subdivision from 3 lots to 2 lots.
Well, yeah, but that's not the application that we have before us or the one we would approve. We can only approve one.
And
So
we can,
the one we have at this point is 3 lots. And so they'd have to go through the entire process for 3 lots only to potentially be.
But all over again.
What I'm suggesting is if the zoning board hypothetically does not endorse a variance so that we cannot approve a 3-lot subdivision, the applicant would have, I would hope, the opportunity at that time to amend the application if they were so inclined to a different subdivision configuration. Presumably, there's no zoning issue with a 2-lot subdivision if they wanted to do that.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, I mean, there's certainly no zoning issue with a 2-lot subdivision. The lots are plenty big enough. That's not what the applicant wants. And the applicant can amend its application or actually there, and that's actually something I want to make clear, Mr. Moran. I believe you and your wife own this property together. It's what's called tenants by the entirety, but you own it together. But the application form that we have only has your on it. So if you own it together, she's got to be on it too, because it would bind both of you. So, okay. But in any event, what is the view of the planning board as to the concept of giving this to the zoning board with Lisa Hockman's recommendation to them that they consider it first if they are willing, And if they approve the subdivision, they approve the zoning variance, it comes back as a 3-lot application. If they don't, then it's up to the applicant to decide whether it's a 2-lot application or he wants to keep his property as it is.
Well, certainly in terms of time, it makes sense for them to go to zoning first. Because to spend several sessions here getting perhaps an approval for 3 and having it get shot down and then having to come back and do it all over again makes no sense.
Well, can I ask the question, Mr. Moran, do you still want to go forward with a 3-lot subdivision, or do you want to go forward with a different plan, the 2-lot subdivision?
We're presenting a proposal for a 3-lot subdivision. So
Okay.
that's our current plan.
Okay. Then I agree with Liz that it should go to the zoning board first.
Okay,
There's no need to take, a formal vote on this. I just wanted to make sure I heard from all of the planning board members if there was any objection.
okay. Is it anybody on the planning board who has not spoken have an objection, just so Lisa may report correctly? Okay, I think then we will, or well, one way or the other, since we either will or will not hear from you guys at some point in the future. I don't know how long the zoning board will take to do whatever it is it's going to do.
And actually, I think I want to revise what I just said. It would probably be a good idea to formally refer this to the zoning board. I think that would be good to have that documented, to take a motion to do so.
Okay,
So moved.
second,
Second,
all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? You got it. See you guys in due course.
Thank you very much. Have a great evening.
Okay, thank you, you too. Okay, is there anything else anybody wants to speak about before we adjourn?
Oh, I just looked quickly. There may be some sort of mistake in the seeker type 1 and type 2 lists that I circulated. So I'm going to take another look to make sure that makes sense. Sounds like there was some confusion about
That's
that.
where it came from. Yeah. There's
You are admitted to practice law in New York, Lisa, not Connecticut, right?
Well, somebody might be in Connecticut too. But yes. Okay, by the way, Rob, when you get the plan, whatever plan you get for this pool that we have now not seen, will be approved by somebody who's licensed in New York, hopefully.
That would be the expectation. We would not want to approve a plan by an out-of-state professional.
Okay, thank you.
It's part of the building, the permit that has to be issued, right?
right.
Correct.
It's New York state law.
I guess we ought to pay some attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you, everybody. See you next month, if not before.
Ron,
Thank you, Ralph.
did you have something, Ron, that you were going to say?
I was going to ask, and I don't know if we could speak about it now. Are we online?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you have something that you want to potentially do an executive session, please.
9 o'clock.
That's permissible.
Understood. Okay, so we could talk about it offline. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.